be on mute. Okay. No one will unmute themselves. We are starting with the Rainy ma'am.
Yes, Reni ma'am, please start.
Jenny, you can begin. Okay, ma'am. Namaste, Vice Principal Dr. Smita ma'am, Coordinator Usha ma'am, teachers, and my dear friends. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. As it is rightly said by Anna Monar, sharing will enrich everyone with more knowledge. On behalf of Ramratna International School, I, Jenny Tredi, would like to welcome you all to this session of Author Talk, where a spirited author will share her knowledge with us all. In these unprecedented times, we have so many questions regarding vaccination, and we are fortunate to have among us Miss Mitra Desai to throw some light on this important topic. In this talk titled Who Enabled Vaccination? Miss Mitra Desai is the author of Shitla, How India Enabled Vaccination. She is driven by the challenges presented by our multicultural and misinformed identities in day-to-day, whether at school, office, or at the playground. She responds these challenges by writing, speaking, and sharing the unmanaged truth. Her work in public sphere is underpinned by a master degree in criminal justice, and she currently works in the Australian Public Service. She is passionate about connecting the dots that reveal unheard stories about India that give each one of us something to be proud of. She does this through articles, podcasts, and documentaries on her website and YouTube channel. I request you all to keep yourself on mute, and if you have any comments or questions, please type in the chat box. Now I request our Vice Principal Dr. Smita ma'am to welcome Miss Mitra Desai.
Thank you, Jenny, and you did a wonderful job, dear. You spoke very well. Excellent. And Namaste, Mitra ma'am, again. Welcome to you.
Namaste.
And thank you for accepting the invitation and conducting this session for our students. I'm definitely sure that all of us are going to learn a lot. Vaccination has caught everyone's attention right now. So we have been having vaccines since years, ages, but this COVID has highlighted it furthermore its importance, I think, because of the fear in which people are living. So yes, it's very important to understand what is vaccination, what is its importance, who enabled it first. So let's hear it from ma'am. I think she's more experienced to talk about it here. So the stage is yours, ma'am. Thank you once again on behalf of the school management, all the students and staff. We really thank you from the bottom of our heart, and we are looking forward to a very enriching session from you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Rajiv. Now I think there was some homework for this session, wasn't there? Who all has done the homework?
Yes, ma'am. The homework was shared with the students and they were asked to research on the questions sent by you. Yes.
Excellent. So can someone give me the answer to the first question? What disease the vaccination was discovered for? Naman?
Ma'am.
You're the one I can see on my screen. Smallpox. Excellent. All right. And who was the one who discovered it? Who was the one who discovered vaccine?
Yeah, I can see here Edward Jenner.
Yes, everyone's saying Edward Jenner. Everyone has looked up Google, haven't they? All right. Okay, let me share my screen and we can take it from there. Okay, so we're going to talk about Chitara, how India enabled vaccination. Now, before we begin, as is customary here in Australia, before we begin the talk, we thank the traditional owners of the land. So I'm speaking to you today from what is called the Ngunnawal country, and the Ngunnawal people are the traditional custodians of this place, Canberra, the place that I'm speaking to you from. So I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I also want to thank RRIS as well as the team there who's given me the opportunity to speak to all of you. So let's begin. So Edward Jenner is the one who developed the vaccine, and it was first developed for smallpox. That is what you found through the internet. Now, what I am going to say is, although we're here to talk about vaccination, really, we're not going to talk about vaccination at all. We're not going to look at the medical aspects of it. What we're looking at is the historicity or the historical aspects of it. But through this talk, what you will discover is not just the glory of India and the knowledge systems, but you will get an idea of how phenomenally genius our ancestors were. So let's begin. The only thing I ask is that you bring your curiosity along and an open mind. So if you've looked at the information on Google, you know that it was Edward Jenner and smallpox. Now, if I show this picture to you, you have no idea what this particular piece is. If I add a little bit more detail, you can start to see what's coming, and then you start to get a sense. If we rely on the information on Google alone, what we have done is the first bit alone, which was we've looked at the information that was on the page. It was right there for us to look at. But what we've actually not done is we've not connected the dots, we've not looked for connections, we've not read between the lines. We've also not done we've not inferred anything else that was not told to us. So basically, we're limited to a very small slice of information that was available to us. And we fail to find the deeper meaning beyond that information. So that's what we're going to try and do today. It's going to be like solving a big jigsaw puzzle, and we're going to do that through the example of smallpox and vaccination. So here we are. We're going to briefly have an overview about what the global scene was about this disease. Then we're going to find out the story that Google's told you. Then we're going to find out the Indian version of that story. So hopefully by the end of this, we will have developed a brand new story for ourselves. Now, if anyone else is interested, there was something similar that I have done about Sushruth, who everyone knows is the father of surgery. But how that came about, there's a fascinating story that I've tracked in 10 parts as a documentary. So that's on YouTube as well. So let's begin. Now, because smallpox has been eradicated for a very long time, most of us wouldn't know what it is. I do apologize if you find the graphic a bit off-putting, but this is a young boy who's suffering from smallpox. Now, that was a highly contagious virus, and it also spread from person-to-person contact. What happened was a rash would develop, particularly on the face, the arms, the legs, and even in the cavity of the mouth. And that would turn into spots that would become filled with a clear fluid or pus. And then eventually it would crust up, and then it would dry and fall off. So now this virus had an incubation period of about 7 to 17 days. And a healthy person could become infected even if they inhaled fluid droplets from the affected individual. So as you can see, this is pretty similar to what we are experiencing with COVID. Now, a person only became infectious once the fever developed. And the most infectious period was during the first week of the illness, but the person remained contagious throughout until the last scab fell off. What also happened was many who survived, they turned blind. But anyone who survived, they developed a lifelong immunity from any subsequent outbreaks of smallpox. So that's the nature of the disease that we're talking about. Now, let's look at how long and how widespread it had been. The first records of smallpox come to us 2,300 years ago, and they are rashes found on 3 Egyptian mummies. So by the 4th century, we start to get unmistakable record in China. Then by the 6th century, China and Korea, they start trading, and the disease goes to Japan. By the 7th century, it travels to Northern Africa, Spain, and Portugal. By the 11th century, when Europe embarks on its crusades, it starts spreading further. By the 15th century, it already travels to Western Africa as the Portuguese crusades take it with them. Now, by the 16th century, it makes its way to the Caribbean, the Central, and the South Americas. And that's because of the European colonization. By the 17th century, it comes to North America. Here in Australia, it comes nearly by the 18th century. So as you can see, this is a disease that was extremely well traveled across the entire globe for several centuries. So we're not talking about a small disease here and there. We're talking about something significant, of significant nature. Now, let's understand how big this was. In his paper, Donald Henderson, he tells us that at least 500 million people, so that's 500 million over a century, died from this disease. And we're looking at 5 million deaths per year. So a disease that was really well traveled and which took a significant death toll. That's the nature of the disease. So if we think about this, surely someone would have had some kind of cure for a disease like this. Well, this is what the prevalent treatments look like. In Europe, it was a mixed bag. There were some herbal remedies. There was one Dr. Sydenham, and he used to give his patients 12 bottles of small beer every 24 hours. So he must have been a really popular doctor. Then there's Chinese insufflation. Now that was nasal insufflation. That's where the scabs that fell off, they would be ground into a powder and people would just snuff it in. And this information comes in a book written in 1549. But the Chinese situation at that time is very similar to what it is now. It is very secret. So it was difficult to find out what was happening in China. Was the treatment effective or not? So that was the second mention. And then the third information we have is at the early beginning of the 17th century. And that's a letter by Dr. Emmanuel Timony. Now, he has written a letter to the exiled Swedish king, which gets translated into French and eventually into English. And this letter is published in 1714. Now, this letter is the first account of variolation. Let me explain to you just a little bit about what variolation is. It's variolation or inoculation. This is a method that is now obsolete. It is not used. But basically, it's a method of immunizing patients against smallpox by infecting them with a substance from the pus from another patient. We'll talk more about that later. But essentially, this is the first time that we hear about variolation. Now, that was the most effective treatment for smallpox at the time. And there was one woman who championed variolation. Her name was Lady Mary Montagu. She's the one you see in the center slide. Now, she was the wife of a British ambassador to the Ottoman court. And she had her 5-year-old son variolated in 1718 while she was in Turkey. Now, when she returned to England in 1721, England was hit with a smallpox epidemic. So she went around telling everyone, look, my boy's already inoculated. So this is quite effective. You should get your children and yourselves inoculated. No one listened to her. So what she did was she took her 3-year-old daughter and she had her inoculated. Still no one listened to her. So then Carolina, the Princess of Wales, she suggested, how about let's do some human experiments? So what they did was they went to Newgate prison and they found 6 prisoners who were condemned to die, and they decided to do experiments on them. You'll not believe, but there was one prisoner, a young boy of 19 years old. He had received a death sentence because he stole 3 wigs. You know, the wigs the judges wear in movies? He'd stolen those 3 wigs, and that's why he was sentenced to die. So what they did was they got 6 prisoners from Newgate prison, and then they gave them the inoculation or the variolation. And the treatment was obviously successful. So then they pardoned them, and those 6 people did not die. So that was the first experiment. But what that meant was now you can deliver the vaccination to inoculation to adults. But what about young children? Well, they decided to do human experiments for that as well. They got 5 orphans from the St. James Parish in Westminster, and they inoculated them. They experimented on them. And once that was successful, they decided that now this treatment can safely be delivered to the prince and princesses in the royal family. So basically, what you see is that the upper class conducted experiments, human experiments, before they took it themselves. After that, across Europe, it was nearly 20 years or so before this treatment became available to other stratas of society. So that's the situation we're talking about. Now, when all of this was happening, then along came Jenner. He was an extremely curious, studious, and enterprising young man, and he has a fascinating biography. So you're welcome to read more about him online, but he's done some fascinating things. He actually even helped Captain Cook on after he came back from one of his missions to catalog all of the species that he had brought back. So Jenner, by the age of 13, he is already starting to work as an apprentice with his local doctor. By the time he's 21, he has enough knowledge where he goes to London to work under a famous surgeon. By the time he's 24, he returns to his hometown and starts practicing as a GP. So now this happens in the year 1773. He comes back to his hometown and starts practicing in 1773. Now, this is where Google and Wikipedia have already told you that Jenner, even as a young boy, he knew what was common knowledge across Europe, that anyone who suffered from cowpox did not suffer from smallpox. And all across Europe, everyone knew that. Jenner continued his practice for 23 years. And then suddenly, in 1796, he decides he's going to experiment on smallpox. And in just 1 year, he found the cure. So in 1797, Jenner finds the cure for smallpox. And then he writes to the Royal Society. Royal Society does not believe it, of course. So what he does is he writes to other surgeons and other doctors. And they then employ his method. And in about 3 years' time, his method gets wide recognition. So by 1802, the British Parliament then gives him £10,000 as a reward for his hard work. And in another 5 years' time, they give him £5,000 more. That's how significant and important his work is considered in terms of vaccination. So that's Jenner and his achievements. But I'm not speaking to you today to take anything away from Jenner's work. What he did was important for the times that he lived in. What I'm saying to you today is that there's a missing link. And to see what that missing link is, we have to quickly and briefly understand what Jenner actually did. Well, now, like I said to you before, Jenner, it was common knowledge across Europe that if you suffered from cowpox, you did not suffer from smallpox. So what Jenner did, there was a dairy maiden, her name was Sarah Nelms, and she was suffering from cowpox. So he extracted the pus material from her, and then he injected that in the 8-year-old boy, whose name was James Phipps. Now, he was the son of Jenner's gardener. What happened after is that James became unwell with cowpox, and he survived cowpox. After that, Jenner then took some smallpox pus material and he injected that in James. And James survived smallpox as well. So in effect, what Jenner did was he proved what was common knowledge to be correct, that James Phipps suffered from cowpox and then he suffered from smallpox and he didn't die. So he just confirmed what was age-old information. But this really isn't as simple as what Google tells you. There's a few questions that you have to ask. If this was common knowledge across Europe for centuries, and we've seen how long the disease was there, why had Europe failed to put 2 and 2 together? Why did Jenner not look into this despite being a GP for nearly 24 years? Or how was it that he was suddenly able to solve this puzzle in just a few months? So you see, there's something here that has happened in the interim, and we need to find out what that missing link is. And that answer comes to us from several Bharati accounts.
Suryansh Jha, I request you please mute yourself. Suryansh Jha. Thank you.
So we get this information from several Bharati accounts. Now, let's quickly look at some of the accounts. The first account comes to us from Robert Gould. Robert Gould writes this letter to Dr. Oliver Gould from the Bengal presidency. Now, mark the date here. It is from 1731. And here he tells us that the operation of inoculation, called by the natives as Tika, has been done in the Kingdom of Bengal as nearly as I can learn about 150 years ago. Now, it was first performed by Dhanvantari, and this operation was considered to be a secret. So this incident is from 1734. Barely 2 decades later, we have another detailed information. Now, this comes to us from Reverend Charles Chase, and this is from his writing called Essay Apologetic, and that is from 1754. There he tells us that this method has been prevalent in Bengal for a very long time, and the variolous material was preserved in a twisted thread that was inserted into a needle and then passed between skin and flesh. So that is how they gave the infection to the next person. Now, he also tells us that some variolous material was preserved from the time of his grandfather or great-grandfather. So what we start to understand is not only did India have a well-developed understanding of the disease, but they also had a method to preserve it from one generation to the next. Now, the most detailed account comes to us from Dr. John Howell, and he is speaking to the London College of Physicians. So he's obviously talking to the president there and members and everyone there. There he tells us that a particular tribe of Brahmins were delegated annually, and they came from the colleges of Vrindavan, Allahabad, and Banaras. They arrived at their respective destinations some week before the usual return of the disease. Now, although they arrived in February, they did not consider the state of the season and acquired information on the state of its distemper. So when you look at this account, what we start to understand is that they even knew what the right time was to start treating the disease. So obviously these Brahmins were considered specialists. Now this is a very detailed account where he further goes on to tell us the method of how they delivered that. Basically, they rubbed the outside of the arm vigorously for 8 to 10 minutes, and then they made 15 to 16 minute incisions. And he's even described the tool. The tool is like a sharp, round needle. And that's what they're using to basically pass on the infection. To do that, what they do is they take a small wad of cotton charged with the variolous material, which is the pus material. And then it's placed on top of the wound and it's moistened with the water of Ganga. And it stays in contact with the wound for several hours. So this is how someone would be infected with smallpox. Now here he tells us that they would never inoculate with fresh material, nor with matter from the disease caught in a natural way. So when you look at this information, you start to understand that these specialist Brahmins knew, or they had enough understanding about immunology to know that they shouldn't be using the stronger ones. They should be using the less virulent strains of the contagion. Further on, he tells us, and this is a mind-blowing admission where he tells us only 1 in a million fail of receiving the infection. And since this practice of the East has been followed without variation and with uniform success, it must have originally been founded on rational principle and experiment. This is where we come across the mention of Shitala Devi, which is also the title of the book and the title of our talk today. But that's a thread that we will explore separately. So now, if you put all of this together, what's the new timeline that we see? The new timeline that we see is that long before Jenner was even born, by 1581, Bharat already had a well-developed method for treating smallpox. So Jenner's cure comes in 1802, and Bharatiya method is available to us at 1581 already. And this is something that the British have documented themselves. This is not me telling you that. So the new picture is this. But there's some more information. So the obvious knowledge gap that we're talking about is that adaptive immunity. That's the kind of immunity that occurs when you expose someone to the pathogen. So basically what we're seeing with COVID is very similar to that. So Jenner was able to cleverly combine the two and utilize the concept of adaptive immunity to create the smallpox vaccination. And that is what earned him the title of father of vaccination or the father of immunology. But as you've already seen, that Indians, the Banaras Brahmins, the Vrindavan Brahmins, they were already fathers of both immunology as well as inoculation. They were treating the disease successfully. Another thing that you'll be surprised is that an entirely different picture of Bharat emerges. See, when you think about medicine now, you have to go to a specialist doctor and you have to wait to get the appointments. At least here in Australia, for us, that's the case. So it's a long wait to get to a particular doctor. But when you look at this picture in Bharat at that time, you see that the inoculators were local cultivators. They were both Hindus and Muslims who were not considered otherwise as esteemed physicians. Or they were Daivadnya Brahmins, you know, the Brahmins who sit under a tree with the parrot drawing the card. Those kind of astrologer Brahmins, they were also able to deliver inoculation. Or there were garland makers and barbers who were able to deliver inoculation. Or there were people who possessed a book called Vasantatika. They were also trained to deliver these inoculations. So the view of Bharat that comes to us is that Bharat had somehow made it possible for everyone, regardless of your resources, to access the treatment. And that really is one of the true geniuses of our ancestors. They were the original masters of, do you know what they call it? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So they were the masters of keeping it simple. Now, moving on to this particular account, this is a long one, but I won't spend too much time on this. But in this History of Smallpox by James Moore, what he tells us is when these Vrindavan or Banaras Brahmins are performing the treatment of inoculation, they recite Gutti Ki Thakura. They recite a verse which they call Gutti Ki Thakurai. And James Moore thinks that this information was available to Bharat in the Atharvana Ved. And he estimates that it was at least 3,000 years ago that this information about Gutti Ki Thakurai or the goddess was available to us. So this is no surprise that India has had information about Shitala Devi for a very long time. Now, if you looked at Shitala Devi before you came here, you would have seen that these are the two pictures available on the internet for her. She'll be seen as wearing a light red or light blue sari with really no ornaments, minimal ornaments. Now she has a pointy broom in one hand and a pot, which she uses to cure the patient. And she's usually mounted on a donkey as her vehicle. Now, what we have to keep in mind is when you think about our gods or our Devis and Devatas, they are multidimensional. Think about it this way. If I asked you, what do you think of when you look at the Akash Kandil for Diwali? You think about all of the things you do for Diwali, the firecrackers, the sweets. Or if I asked you, what comes to mind when you look at Santa Claus? Then you think about Christmas and the cakes and the shopping again and the holidays. So just like that, the gods and the deities that Bharat has, it enshrines an entire concept. It's there's a lot of information packed into that iconography. So what we find after we look at Sita Devi's iconography is that maybe the winnowing fan on her head depicts fanning the patients to keep their temperature down, or when she carries the pot of cold water to relieve the patient's fever. In one of her hands is a small bowl, which may be the pus material. The broom could be a reminder to keep our surroundings clean, or it could also be a pointy, prickly thing that you take to deliver the tika. So there's a variety of things, there's a variety of possibilities here for us to look at. Now, also, Shita Ashtami, that only happened, I think, a fortnight ago. Now, that is placed at the cusp or the confluence where the end of spring and the start of summer. That is because these specialists, they knew very well that during the dry and humid months, the death rate goes up. So that is why it was a reminder that that season is coming up. So you've got to be careful, you've got to be mindful. So all of the utsavs are a reminder of that as well. So all of this knowledge was combined into that understanding of Shitara Devi. Now, sorry, I'll go back here. So she's identified as the goddess of all eruptions, but the earliest Ayurvedic texts identify these eruptions as what's called Masurika. I probably won't spend too much time here because I know kids will get bored, but Masurika is identified by Madhavakara in a book that he wrote in the 8th century. And in that book, he is basically compiling information from Charaka Samhita, Sushrut Samhita, and a few other Ayurvedic texts. Now, he is in turn using information from Vagbhata, who's written this information in the 7th century. In Vagbhata's book, he tells us that on whose body Masurika appears like coral globules, breaks out, then swiftly vanishes, dies quickly. So Vagbhata is in turn drawing on work from Charak and Sushrut. So I'm taking a little farther back in history here. Like I said, we are going to look at the historicity. So bear with me, just a couple more slides. So you've seen that both Madhavakara and Vagbhata, they're referring to Sushruta's work. So let's look at what Sushrut has to say. Now, Sushrut talks about this as a Kshudra Roga, but he gives us a description saying the yellow or copper colored pustules are attended with pain, fever, and burning, appearing all over the body and the face, even inside the cavity of the mouth. It's called Masurika. Now, I'm just going to warn you, I have one graphic image. This is a girl who's suffering from smallpox, and this is Masoor. So if you've eaten Masoor ki dal, you probably know what Masoor looks like. See how similar it looks like on the girl who's suffering from smallpox? That's how accurate Sushruta's description was. And so what's happened is, Sushrut has written all of this down, Charak has written all of this down, and then this knowledge, Bharat happily transferred all over the world. And so there's information available to us which tells us that as early as the 5th century, there was a Persian doctor by the name of Gurzau who traveled to India, and he took medical books back. These books were subsequently transferred and translated from Sanskrit into Arabic and Persian and other languages. So we shouldn't be too surprised. Remember in one of the earlier slides, in the 17th century, there was Turkish variolation. That was the first mention. We shouldn't be surprised because Bharat had already sent that information out a long, long time ago. This was available with us. We just gave it away freely. Now, elsewhere in the Sushrut series, I've done some work. I won't spend much time on that, but you're welcome to ask me questions later if you want. But in that series, I worked with Sri Nilesh Oak, who does dating of Mahabharata, Ramayana, and all of those. And based on his works, we've identified that Sushrut was living in Bharat prior to Mahabharata times. So we're looking at 7,581 years ago. So now the new timeline, and this is the oh my God moment for me when I first understood it. Jenner has the information in 1796, 97. Madhavakara and Vagbhat gave us the Ayurvedic texts relating to this information much before, by 7th and 8th century. And if we take Sushrut's work into account, we're now looking at a timeline that stretches 7,500 years into antiquity. And while we're looking at all of this, the final picture that emerges is that long before Edward Jenner, Bharat knew about this. Bharat was treating smallpox since ancient times. Bharat had multiple methods of treating it. Bharat had multiple ways of treating and handling the infection. And they had enough understanding about the seasons and when to administer the treatment. And all this knowledge our ancestors had encapsulated in the worship or the conversation around Shitala Devi. So you would think, obviously, that if all of this information was available, then why did Jenner not mention it? Well, we have no direct information that Jenner looked at this narrative or not, but we do know that everything that was taken from India was gradually erased. Because India has always been in a place where it was colonized and someone else came and ruled over it, they came to mine everything that you had. So that means your finances, your knowledge, everything. So what you're looking at is where the Indian contributions are thanklessly erased. I'm going to leave this on the screen for 30 seconds for you to skim through. I'm not going to read these. So you'll see that from these accounts, we can clearly tell that India has not received any credit for such a phenomenally important contribution. In fact, by the time you come to the fourth account by Sir George Baker, he was the one who went on to write encyclopedias. He has written Indian contribution of altogether, and in England comes to be termed as the native country of inoculation. So this is how India's contribution was erased. Now, the more you will read and the more you'll study, you'll realize that really it is impossible to tell the story of human civilization without some foundational contribution or enabling technology from Bharat. And yet we're living in a world where we have no idea of Bharat's contributions. All the stories are being told without Bharat's contribution. So the reason I'm talking to you today is so that you, the next generation, becomes empowered to do the research and to do all of the hard work so that we can start telling Bharat's story again. So in the book Shitala, it basically unfolds as a simple conversation between a grandfather and a granddaughter. And basically it's all of the information that I've told you, it flows through, and you'll find a lot more information in addition to what I've just told you. So I'm happy that I've had the opportunity to speak to all of you and share this information. I will conclude by saying that I wish all of you good health in the COVID year. So I'll stop my screen now and I will chat with you one-on-one.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions, students?
No, ma'am.
No questions? Come on, Ed.
Any comment, any questions?
Excuse me, ma'am, can I ask?
Yes, Chandni.
Ma'am, for the research you have done, this is a very deep research and very like hard work. So like, can we rely on Google for this kind of research?
What do you think, Jan? Am I speaking to Janvi? Sorry, I can't see who's speaking.
Yes, ma'am.
Janvi, yes. All right. So after you've heard and seen this presentation, what do you feel? Do you feel you can rely on Google alone to do this work?
No, ma'am.
So if you remember the light bulb that I showed at the beginning, the information available to us on Google is uh, well, what you see on the first page is available to the highest bidder, isn't it? If you've
Yes.
done your search engine optimization and everything else right, you show up on the first page. How many of us go to the third page or the fourth page of Google to find that
No,
information?
on the first page I put. Not on the
Exactly. And so that is why we also have to put in the hard work and do a bit more research, a bit more digging. And one of the things I said was Google will only tell you what it wants to tell you, but there's a lot of information that it is not telling you. And often with Bharat, there's a lot of information that no one wants you to know. So you will have to do the extra bit of digging, especially if you're researching an in-depth topic. So definitely look beyond Google.
Ma'am, well, I've got a question in my mind that was it a foolishness or a goodness that we were sharing everyone, each and everything with everyone in the world?
Um, well, so like I said before, we've always been in a position where India was seen as a conquest. Bharat was always called the Sone ki Chidiya. Now, why was it called Sone ki Chidiya? That is because we had managed to achieve such phenomenal heights in everything that we did. That is why everyone came to Bharat, looking for some or the other kind of riches. Now, we have always been a civilization that has believed in giving. Sarve Sukhina Santu, Sarve Santu Niramaya. We make the prayer that is applicable for everyone. So we are never knowledge hoarders. So we gave it generously, and after a point, it was taken from us. It was taken from us by force, and history, like they say, is written by the victors. So obviously, the colonizers have written a point of view of history which glorifies them. That is why it is going to be more important for your generation to do the digging and to retell the story from a Bharatiya point of view. So I don't think it was foolish of us. This knowledge is available to us today purely because at that time we sent it out of India. That's why we can still look at the records and say, we did that.
So it was by like sharing with everyone, each and every person in the world was a kind of betterment for us too. Means we
Yes.
are getting each and everything now because we shared it ago.
Yes. And so in some ways, are we not all the beneficiaries of vaccination today? So what India sent out became the enabling technology for Jenner to develop his vaccine. And therefore today you and I can sit here and get a vaccine, can't we?
Yes, that's true.
You're a quiet bunch. Or am I getting questions in
Janvi
the
has
chat?
a question.
Sorry?
Janvi has a question.
Yes.
Ma'am, can I know what are your sources or how did you get into researching of particularly this topic?
Okay, so I'll tackle the sources first. There's heaps of sources, and so this is a very small book, but towards the end of it, I have given all of the original sources, and they're all available to us, thankfully, because of Google. But from Google, you go into archive.org or other places through where you access the actual books. And those are the books that I've utilized. Also, in some cases, if I need to, I have a friend who's in UK who was able to access the original documents from the British Library. So I was able to access a lot of information outside of just the web. Now, in terms of what was your second question? I forgot to write it down.
How did you get into this particular topic for research?
All right. So this is the second bit of the research that I've done. The first one was Sushrut and his Samhita. And that was something I did after I heard Nilesh Oak's talk about surgery. And after I did that research, a lot of people sent me a lot of stuff saying, you should check this, you should check this. And this topic seemed quite fascinating at the time. And not much work was done on it. So I picked it up, and the more I read, the more I became fascinated with it. And I thought, this we have to talk. And then I think it came at the right time, because now everyone's talking about the vaccine. So good timing, I think.
Ma'am, can I add something?
Yes, ma'am.
Not a hard question, Smita ma'am.
No question at all. I am not going to ask any question, but what I feel is the wonderful information, and it was an eye-opening session. I mean, we always somewhere, I feel after listening to your talk, and I have been always thinking about it, that we have somewhere underestimated our own country, our own culture. And Western people, I have always observed, I have been to European countries, and I've always seen they have high regards for their own culture, for their country. So that is where we have lacked, and that is where our new generation lacks, and they need to, get into it. That first start valuing your own culture, your own country, and then even though whatever, I mean, like we have put in so much of effort, everything I feel has originated from India, be it language in the form of Sanskrit, और हम पतंजलि को ले लीजिए, चरक को ले लीजिए, सुश्रुत को ले लीजिए, नागार्जुना को ले लीजिए, हम हर चीज हमें इंडिया में उसका ओरिजिन मिल जाता है, right? But somewhere our students are not aware about it. They are aware of all the Western philosophers, all the Western scientists, European scientists, but they are not aware of our own culture. So what I feel is students need to research deep into our own culture first. Understand our own culture, value it, feel proud of it, feel proud of your own country, the rich resource and culture it has in it. And eventually, I think even then we will start getting the credit of what we have started or what we are doing. That is what my thought process is, very important. And second, as Janvi asked about research, I feel where we lack is in reading. Deep reading, constant reading, reading of different genres, different informative materials will automatically guide you towards research, I feel. Am I right, ma'am?
Yes. And also one thing I will add to what you're saying, Smita ji, is when we're reading online, we have to be extremely mindful of who is writing. So often when we're reading, especially any English literature, it will be written by someone from the outside looking in. And often it's like a visitor writing or showing a tourist blog. They don't have the context. And when they're writing, they may not even have the reverence. For example, if I see a temple, I will automatically do this out of reverence or because I know what temple I'm passing. Same is not the case with a visitor. So they lack both the context and the reverence for what they're looking at. And for us, it is extremely important to develop a view of us understanding ourselves a bit better. And I cannot stress this enough. We need to make sure that we are speaking in our mother tongues and we are learning Sanskrit as well to be able to understand ourselves a bit better. So I'm going to encourage all of your students, whatever your mother tongue is, please make sure you speak in that. In this movie, I don't know if you've seen Manikarnika movie by what's her name? Kangana Ranaut. There she makes a dialogue which I absolutely love. She says, "Angrezi hamara hunar ho sakta hai, hamari matrubhasha nahi," and that is very important. So the kind of information I get when I'm reading a Marathi book, where there is no translation, no interpretation, that is very different than when I'm reading an English translation. Yes, it comes close, but still. So it is, again, make sure you're connected to your mother tongues, whatever they are, because they are so rich in literature.
Actually, it's like our life is like a tree, man. Tree cannot survive without roots. Once the roots are cut, the tree dies. Our culture are our roots, basically. if we detach ourselves from our culture, then our life, I mean, you're leading a life, but that becomes a superficial life. That's what I feel.
Yes, agree.
Thank you, ma'am. It was really wonderful listening to you. Excellent session. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right. So everyone's going to do outside of Google research, isn't it? Come on, say yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I
Yes, ma'am.
uh,
And everyone's going to be
Yes,
speaking in
ma'am.
more than one language. Yeah.
yes, ma'am, I'm
All
sure.
right.
I'm sure all the kids will be looking more into the details what you have informed us. I will now ask Soumya to present the vote of thanks. Soumya?
Reni ma'am, only 1 second, Reni ma'am. Can I
Yes.
ask something? I just
Yes,
want
sure,
to
ma'am.
say something. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Namaste, ma'am. Namaste, Desai, ma'am. I'm teaching social science, so I would like to add here. In whole session, you were speaking Bharat, Bharat. It really made me so happy today, and I was highly fascinated by the way you were taking this word in this English flow in the language. So really today, I also learned from you that how really we should value, because this was the first question. Even Bhavya also asked that, ma'am. Every time it happens that we were having each and everything till then we couldn't understand it. Either it's a Turkish, they came and they looted, they plundered and they looted. They each and every time we were facing this situation with us. So why couldn't we do? हमारा कल्चर इतना क्या था मैम कि हम किसी को जवाब भी नहीं दे पाए और हम कहीं जाके कहीं हम कॉलोनाइज भी नहीं हो पाए. So what was the reason? So ma'am, only one thing I learned from you, that we should start from each and each centimeter in our life, that how much we can value ourselves, our culture. That is very important and very biggest learning from you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. But Vandana ji, one thing I will say here, that please do not think that we were not able to retaliate. In fact, the only reason that Bharat has sustained for such a long period, despite incredible brutality, is because our ancestors have put up a fight. If we do not understand what it is that we are striving for, then we will be a lost cause. But 1400 years of incredible brutality we have survived. And actually, that is one of the reasons why, if you look at me, I'm wearing my kumkum right now. I did not do that several years ago. I absolutely did not do that. I'm the kind of person who would go around wearing a pair of jeans, riding a motorcycle. I was doing all the things that rebellious teenagers do. But as I've come to understand over the years, I respect the culture much better now, because I start to understand and see that there's a lot more that our elders were trying to teach us. And for that matter, now I wear this with pride, because we have survived erasure. We are here against all odds, despite every attempt to erase Bharat. And one of the things that they erased was your identity. And the identity was taken away by
Yes, ma'am.
erasing any visible signs. And that is why I started putting it back on.
Yes,
So
ma'am. Exactly. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. The
yes,
thing
Bhavya.
is, like, we had lost our unity that time. If we would have our unity that time, so no one could able to conquer us, or no one would be able to, means we wouldn't be able to lose our identity. The same thing is like that. As the about, we take an example of Sri Krishna. He took killed
Mhm.
Kans. He needed to unite all 108 villages, so because of that, he was able to kill Kans because of unity. And we are just thinking like he was alone and killing everyone. He was alone fighting other, but that's not true. He took everyone with him and he fought. The
Well
thing
done.
is
I'm so
like,
happy to hear that.
yes,
Someone's been doing good reading.
Bhavya, anyway, students always remember nobody can do anything alone. It's always a team or group of people coming together, and then only you can do or you can achieve whatever you wish to. And during Britishers, we were at the verge of losing the identity, because yes, many of us were not united, and we started giving importance to Western culture, to what East India Company and Britishers were promoting. That was their first target, to kill our culture, and that is the thing they used against us. But thanks to handful of people, freedom fighters, who came together and ensure that we don't lose our identity. So it is very important that all of us stay united and be rooted to the ground. That is your culture. And then nobody will be able to, uproot you or take away your identity from you.
Yes, ma'am.
Janvi is saying something in the comment. What are you saying, Janvi? We only allowed Britishers to come in. Yes and no. So they came, they went by force everywhere. So I think what we could have done better is doing our own Purva Paksha, or understanding who is coming in, keeping an eye out. It wasn't just for trading. So if you look at the world history, they went everywhere. The history of Japan or the Southeast Asian islands, everywhere as well. Um, what we could have done better is preparing for the possibility that, and if you read Maratha history, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj anticipated and knew this way ahead of time. He was very careful, very judicious with allowing the British any allowances for trading. But that's a separate topic, a longer topic. But yes, we could have done better to study that. What we need to do now is, now we need to understand who is it that's attacking Bharat, what's the agenda, and what can you and I do to ensure that we survive. So like Bhavya said, we need to be united. Well, what are you all going to do about it? That's the question, because you are right there. I'm sitting here. You are in the middle of it all. So you have to decide how you're going to face this.
Like this only, because there are many generations. Like if you have given a session and there are like 58 people over here, we have understood. What about the other billions of people who have not understood the fact that India needs to be united?
So now I have told all of you. So 58 ambassadors are right here. Now you speak to even one person, suddenly you start multiplying the effect. So it's up to each and every one of us to do the talking, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
That's right. Anyone else has a comment or any question? Anyone, students? Okay. I would now request Soumya to present the vote of thanks. Soumya?
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. I, Soumya Gaikwad, am honored to present the vote of thanks for today's talk. I would like to thank Ms. Mitra Desai for enlightening us in vaccination. Today's talk was full of knowledge. It gave deep insights into the topic and also revealed some interesting facts. The point where Ms. Desai told us about the history of vaccination and that India was way ahead in vaccination was really informative. We should now have more reason to be proud of our ancestors. I'm pretty sure the precious knowledge that Ms. Mitra Desai shared has definitely addressed many questions on this topic. Once again, I would like to thank Ms. Mitra Desai for taking out time from her busy schedule and making us aware about this pertinent topic. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to thank our dear principal, Dr. Jaya Parekh, for organizing the talk and inviting Ms. Mitra Desai. I would also like to thank and appreciate our Vice Principal, ma'am, Dr. Smita, ma'am, our coordinator, and all the teachers and students present here for being a wonderful audience. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Smita ji. And thank you all the students for taking the time to talk to me. I enjoyed the session so very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We also enjoyed the session a lot. And we
All
also
right. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. It was indeed a very wonderful session. Like, it was enriching. Like, we got to know so much. So I'm sure, yes, as students are saying that they learned a lot today. So thank you very much, ma'am, for your valuable time. It was indeed a wonderful
If
session.
anyone has any questions, Ushaji, I'm more than happy for you to send them to me, and I'll write back with a response.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, students, if you have any more questions, you can you can send it to us. We will send it to ma'am. Okay, children. So if you have any more questions, so
Have a nice day.
yes.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you, ma'am.
students.
Have a nice day.
Bye,
Thank you,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Bye,
Bye,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, everybody. Bye
Bye,
bye.
ma'am. Thank you,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you, ma'am.
everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, children. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye. It was a wonderful session.